Hi, my name is James Wall. I'll be talking to you today about market assessment for medical device innovation. My background is as a pediatric surgeon at Stanford University, and I also have experience in the medical device development field as a former biodesign fellow at Stanford, and currently I'm the chief medical officer of a company that I founded that produces a device aimed at making epidural access safer and more effective. So market assessment, is it important? The answer is definitely yes. I call this talk, "Hey, I have this idea," because almost every day I hear from one of my physician colleagues, "Hey, I have this idea. Is there something we should do about it? This could be a huge business. This could make me rich. This could change the world." And I've almost never heard someone come to me and say, "Hey, I have this idea and I've thought through all the market implications and how we can get this product to the market." And if you haven't thought through that stuff, then really all you have is an idea, and sort of everybody's got those, but the ability to go to the next level of knowing how your idea can become reality is heavily dependent on doing a good market assessment and understanding how your product is going to fit into the world. So in today's talk, I'm going to go through some of the questions that I ask myself when someone comes to me with a new idea to say, what kind of value does this have in the medical device market? The first question I always ask is, what is the need? If you have an idea, you're obviously trying to solve a problem, but have you really thought through the problem? Here's an example. Think about bypass surgery. I've had a lot of people say, it's really difficult to, sew the little tiny veins to the aorta when you're trying to do cardiac bypass surgery. We need a tool that can make that easier. We need to put a little bend on this instrument and it'll be easier to get around the corner. Okay, that may be something we need. But think back on that need. Is the need really a bend on an instrument? Is the need a faster way to do cardiac surgery so you stay off the pump so that patients don't have as many complications? Or is the need even higher and it's a better way to revascularize the heart, in which case you can think about endovascular therapies and stents and even drug therapies and other things. So defining your need is always the best place to start as you're beginning to think about then what market you're going to get into. So a clear, concise statement that defines the need is really important. And once we go through all these questions, I'll talk to you a little bit about how I answered these questions in the company that I was a founder of. Once you've figured out your need, then you have a more clear picture of what the market is. You need to figure out how big the problem is. And I think the best way to do that is really to talk to the experts and see what they think. If you talk to people in the field, find out, is this really causing problems? I also encourage you to observe and see, is it really a problem? The flip side of that argument is that some people, most notably Steve Jobs, would say, if you ask your customer what you want, you'll never be an innovator. And that to some extent is true. And Henry Ford said if I had asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. So always take the experts with a little bit of grain of salt, but they are the ones who are going to use the product, and you need to know from them if you're addressing a big problem. Next set of questions focuses on the market size. And when you're talking about the size of the market, usually people put it into one number, which is dollars. But in order to get to that money value of the market, you need to understand some of the basic principles of the market. And in medicine, that includes the incidence of the disease you're looking to treat, the number of procedures if you're looking at a device that's procedure-based, and then think realistically about the adoption of your idea. Are you going to be able to, if you have a device for a cardiac surgeon, get adoption by every cardiac surgeon in the world, which is highly unlikely? Or are you realistically going to be able to capture 5-10% of the market? The next question I ask is, who are your competitors? And that's important in terms of figuring out how you're going to get into the market. There's really, in my mind, three sizes of competitors. One is large device companies who tend to bundle products. And they can be very difficult to compete against because with bundled products, they really have power over the buyer. With their contracts, they can require them to use, a certain percentage of their devices exclusively. And if you're, building a relatively small product to compete against only one of their small products, it's going to be pretty difficult to get into the market unless it's got massive appeal to the physicians. Then there's medium-sized companies who tend to have a few products, often use distributors, and those are a little bit easier to compete against because the distributor is really going to sell whatever makes them money, and it's not necessarily going to be in the interest of the company. Or maybe your competitor is another small company, another startup, in which case you're on pretty even footing. Ultimately, I guess there's also the potential that you have no natural competitor if you're a completely new product. But ultimately, if it's such a good need that you're solving, you'll probably end up with competition sooner than later. The next set of questions I ask myself is what drives the stakeholders in your market? And in medicine, it's a complicated group of stakeholders. And what I mean by stakeholders is the people who are motivated to adopt and purchase your product. In medicine, there's generally four groups. There's the patient, who generally safety and speed of the procedure and comfort are the number one issues for them. Physicians, who vary among different groups of physicians, but generally safety, again, speed of the procedure, and to some extent financial compensation and whether they can get paid more or less for doing the procedure with a certain device. Or if the cost of the device comes out of their bottom line, can be something that motivates them. The hospital, which again motivated by safety, but also motivated by a bottom line. Hospitals have to, either the for-profits have to make money or the non-profits at least have to keep the lights turned on, so they have to be cost conscious, and they're not going to be willing to spend a huge amount more money on a new device that's not necessarily better. And finally, you have to consider the insurance companies and other payers, which in some countries may be the national health services, but ultimately somebody is paying for the device, and again, they're going to be motivated by the cost. Also by complications, because often those payers are responsible for complications. So to the extent that you can reduce cost of complications, you can justify a higher price, or if you can reduce their cost in other ways, you can justify a higher price.